Amazing. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce myself because I know a few of you actually don't know me and I don't know you. In this crazy world of Zoom and all this online stuff, it's this incredible opportunity for us to kind of connect in multiple ways. But it's interesting because I have been a chiropractor for 24 years in full-time practice. And so I am very used to being smack dab in front of people all the time. And for the last couple of years, I'll tell a little bit about my story because I think it's pertinent to what the topic is tonight. But this is a new way for all of us. So I'm excited because it gives us an opportunity to connect with people around the world. I know that there's someone on here from Australia, probably not right now, but she'll be listening in replay. So whether you are listening to us right now or listening to me live, I welcome you. If you're in replay, I love you just as much. My name is Laura Foster. I also go by Soul Inspired Girl. Collaborating with women is totally my jam. And tonight I am going to be talking about reclaiming your voice and living courageously with yourself, most importantly, with your voice, with your truth, how to live more authentically, how to stake your claim and, get your rudder firmly rooted beneath you in such a way that you feel connected to who you are and your deep sense of intuition. Now, I know we're only working for an hour tonight, but I want to give you as much meat as possible. But I do also want to share a little bit about where I'm coming from because I think it's pertinent rather to this idea of living courageously. So I feel deeply called to work with women. When I was in private practice as a chiropractor, I would say at least 75%, I think, of my patients were female. And so when I went from being a full-time chiropractor to coaching women, initially I just started off coaching, and then it took me about 33 seconds before I realized I really wanted to work with women. I feel very inspired by women, the work we do in the world, and what I feel very strongly, especially right now in the world, is this sense of feminine rising. And I feel it's happening as we speak. It's the work we do. It's the way that we show up. And it's really been happening, I think, for the latter part of the decade, if not longer. And I feel that women are being called to step into themselves in a way like they never have before, to connect with who we are, to live with our most authentic self, and to speak and spread our voice and our gifts into the world. And when I talk about this, because if you've been on any of my programs, you've been in any of my courses, for goodness sakes, if you've been a coaching client of mine, you know that I speak to this feminine rising. And when I speak to other women about it, and I ask them how they feel about this, they kind of have this nervous or sort of this anticipatory feeling that comes up from within, because there's this sense that they understand it's happening too. And if maybe you've never really thought about it before, this will be an opportunity for you to kind of tap into it and ask yourself if what you feel, is it nervousness? Is it anticipation? Is it this rising of the feminine? Now, I know that men are important, but I think that women are being called in a way like they never have before. So this work, this topic, this reclaiming your voice, kind of re-remembering who you are, I think it couldn't be more timely. It is not my idea. It is something that I've come to in my own way. In 2019, I sold my clinic in Newmarket. I know a few of you on here have been practice members of mine. And not because I didn't want to practice anymore. It was actually quite the contrary. I felt a calling. And this is what can be really difficult about having a sense of a calling. But I have done my very best to listen to the whispers and the nudges and the serendipities and the kind of unavoidable happenings that have been happening in my life for the last number of years that has asked me to kind of step into my more authentic version of myself. So what I did, because I love chiropractic practice so much, is I started to kind of pull in other things that I felt called to do. So I ran health retreats mainly for the better part on and off over 10 years. And then I started to do programs online. I started with a Whole Foods kind of sugar detox program. I'm sure some of you on here have done that before. But then I started to feel like I wanted to step outside my, shall we just say, the title I had given myself. And I wanted to marry my passions, which is to bring together the things that I feel I love so deeply in my heart. So there is health, but there's also travel, and there's adventure, and there's yoga, and there's a sense of personal development, for lack of a better word. And I started hosting retreats in Costa Rica and Mexico and the BC Rockies and Spain and you name it. And this led me to focusing my energy pretty much 95% on coaching women, whether it's one-on-one and in group form. And I want you to know, and if you know me, you know this, I literally felt unsure, scared, and excited with every step that I took, every single one, still do. And I kept inching or leaping forward, really from the sense of feeling myself forward. So not that I knew, it wasn't strongly as that, it was feeling myself forward. And you can maybe relate to this idea that you maybe don't know what the best next decision to do, but you feel called, you feel pulled, you feel like you're stepping forward. And in March of 2020, I knew that I was going to be moving to Kelowna. Lucky me. I am from the province of British Columbia, but I have lived in Ontario for over 20 years. And I was initially going to port my chiropractic license to this province and potentially think about opening up a bit of a boutique practice, marrying my passions one more time. And, you know, like many of you, I experienced a giant cosmic redirect. I'm sure that you can relate to this. And as a regulated health professional, I wanted to share how I was feeling. So let's go back to March for a moment and just kind of pause on how many of us, or at least I'll talk from where I was at, how I was feeling back in March. I felt like there was this truth that was bubbling up inside me. Literally, I could hardly stop it. And one day I decided to go on a walk, like walk number 688, to kind of quell my craziness of the day. And I, without really thinking too much about it, I turned on IGTV and I posted a rather impromptu video. Some of you may have seen it. And I spoke my truth, shall I say. Now, that's an issue. When you are a regulated health professional, as a chiropractor, as medical doctors, as many other regulated health professionals, you are quite literally told what is acceptable for you to speak about and what is unacceptable. And in health professionals, if you are going against the common narrative, you place yourself in a very dangerous area. And I had a decision to make. A couple days before I pulled out my phone and did the IGTV, I came to kind of this sense of I needed to retire my license because I wanted to speak freely. And I have to tell you, you know, it took me a couple days or less to make the decision, but it took me a couple days to announce it to anyone because frankly, I was pissed off that I felt like I needed to do that in order to speak my truth. Now, it's semi-irrelevant what my truth was, but suffice to say, I wanted to speak about the things that I knew better. As I saw things roll out in the province of Ontario, and I have this 30-year understanding of science and the human body and physiology and immunity and so on, raised two children of my own, I had things that I wanted to say. And I knew that I couldn't say it without significant retribution. There is absolutely no difference between what you say personally and what you say professional. When you are a regulated health professional, you are at the mercy of their regulations. So I gave up my license, I retired it, I picked up my phone and I spoke rather impromptu. I never even thought about what I was going to say about it. But I shared from my heart, I spoke very candidly, and I turned it off and I posted it. And what I didn't expect was the shitstorm, pardon my language, of the response. And not in a bad way. I really didn't get any negative flack for what was at the time a little bit controversial, but in the tidal wave of support. And the messages that came to me were, you're so courageous. I wish I could do that. I feel stifled. I feel marginalized. I feel minimalized. I want to be able to speak up. I want to speak out. I don't want to feel silenced. And I would say probably in the margins of 95% of those messages were coming for women. It was astounding to me. Now, it was interesting because when this all happened to me, it really made me want to tap into the sense of why did I feel, compelled to speak my truth? And how did I feel in doing so? It was this sense of curiosity. And I'll be honest with you, speaking my truth that day was 1000% for me. Sure, it might have, educated someone, it might have inspired somebody, and, in some way, shape, or form might have shifted the trajectory of someone's life. I'm not saying those things didn't happen, but I'll be honest with you when I say I said it for my own reasons. And I had to ask myself, why is it that I felt so compelled to a point of tears with my family announcing that I needed to give up my license? And honestly, when they see that look in my face and they feel the energy from me, they're like, okay. And it was really interesting to me because I knew that I felt this deep sense of self-honoring, and that's what it was about for me. So the response I had when I honored myself and spoke my truth this very much informed me that women are very much wanting and needing to speak their truth, first to themselves, if not anyone else, and want to do so in a way where they feel more ease, with more confidence and more courage. So it eventually turned into a program, which I'll talk about a little bit at the end. I will also be giving away a couple of giveaways at the end of the workshop tonight. So if you're here at the end, I'm going to go ahead and do a draw for a spot in my program, my Reclaim Your Voice program. I'm also going to be giving a giveaway of one of my hardback journals that everyone loves. Just as an aside, I will be doing it at the very end. So I want to be able to get to the meat of this concept today, but I would love if we, even though I did this in a webinar format for good reason, I did want to ask you a question. And if you could just do me the honor of opening up your chat bar, and I'm going to pose a question to you. And I'm really curious and want to know with my whole heart how you feel about this, okay? This is going to inform me a little bit about what direction I want to do. So I would love to know, what is your relationship to speaking your truth and using your voice? Okay, so what's your relationship to it? Do you ever feel drawn or compelled, like I was talking about, this bubbling up within me to speak my truth? Have you felt that way in a way that you've maybe never done before? Like, do you feel this calling in a way that you've never have? Or do you ever feel compelled to want to speak your truth in any amount? I'm not talking about just opening up your phone and talking in a video. Could be to yourself, saying your truth to your intimate partner or somebody else in your inner circle or at work or what have you. But you either find yourself editing yourself, you find yourself shrinking, even silencing your voice, or maybe you're able to get your truth out into the world, to speak your truth, but then you feel this backpedaling afterwards. Okay? So let's go ahead. Just let me know where you're at with that. Here we go. Just pulling up the chat bar on my side. I feel compelled to speak. They have to edit. Don't feel justified to share my truth outwardly. And I want everyone on here to kind of just take a little trip through here and just see. Because I know that this is compelled, but you have to edit. Keep going. Yeah. Getting better at speaking my truth. Fear of judgment, not being accepted. I am exposing and evolving what my truth is for my own self. Oh my gosh. I feel strongly about speaking up, but I do feel I need to edit myself. There's some truth, a lump, fear of judgment. Yeah. Thank you for your honesty, first of all. Keep them coming. Sometimes think it's about being careful due to professional ties. Dr. Andrea, I hear you. Let me tell you, the majority of those storms were for other regulated health professionals that wanted to say what I was saying, or at least wanted to say their truth. Most definitely trying not to be right. Thank you so, so much for your honesty. And so today I want to give you at least a few tangible strategies and some perspective. I love it. Keep it coming. That you can start to use immediately that will start to make a difference in your ability to speak your truth and, more importantly, honor your truth. So this question is about checking in with yourself. So here you go. If you feel hesitant or unable to use your voice to express your truth in the way that you would like, Because this isn't about, you know, blah, 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 blahing all over the place. This is about looking yourself in the mirror and telling yourself the truth. This is about looking across the table at your intimate partner and telling them the truth. This is about, you know, standing up in the boardroom, or any time that you feel you have a truth, something you're feeling, something that you want to share. What specifically prevents you from speaking your absolute truth? Yeah, and some people are already saying this. Of course, yes, it does definitely, Jennifer, depend on the audience. So the thing that I see is that typically, and keeping in mind that this is my third time running Reclaim Your Voice, is it's fear, right? It's some level of fear typically, okay? And it depends on the situation you're in, but it's a fear of often being humiliated or embarrassed or shame. And maybe it's fear that you won't be able to defend yourself, or that your opinion won't be valued. But what if I said that sometimes the thing that often stands in our way of speaking our truth, now just hear me out with this, is we fear that we won't be accepted, right? But worse, we fear that we'll be rejected, and this triggers fears of abandonment or feelings of unworthiness, okay? That we hold back from speaking our truth in multiple situations because it can trigger a fear of abandonment, unworthiness, feelings that you're unlovable. Now, I realize that for most of us, our adult cognitive brain doesn't see the connection between finding ourselves editing or silencing our voice and fear of being unlovable or abandoned. Some of us may have that consideration, right? Some of us may recognize that. But for a lot of us, we don't recognize that we have this subconscious connection, this subconscious fear that more cases than not, it really began in our childhood. And to be truthful, it served a purpose for one reason or another at the time. But when the fear stays with us, it can subconsciously, the worst word in the forever for me, interrupt our ability to speak, and definitely takes away our ability to do it with a lot of ease and consequence. So I want to show you how this might show up before we get into too far. And I call this origin work. And it serves a very powerful purpose. A lot of times people say to me, what's the point of looking backwards? It's not about us staring backwards. It's about us reflecting backwards. Because when we understand our origins, and in this case, our origins to being able to speak up or speak out or speak our truth or be seen or be vulnerable, all of those things, it is in showing us our tendencies, right? So it makes us increase our level of self-awareness, which is always an amazing thing. And it potentially even tells us about our blind spots. So when we know what our tendency is, and we know what our blind spots are with a greater level of awareness, then of course this allows us to work through them and then create some empowering strategies moving forward so that it doesn't prevent us. So this is what this can look like, okay? So I just want to give you some examples of where we get this from. So as a child, you may have had certain behaviors that were either mirrored to you or mentored to you, or in one way or another influenced your relationship to using your voice. So here's some questions for you. Number one is, what was your experience in childhood with using your voice and speaking your truth? So what was your experience? Just take a moment to reflect back. Was it welcomed or was it unwelcomed? Okay, because for some of us as children, using our voice and speaking our truth was very much welcomed in certain ways perhaps. And for other people, it was very unwelcomed. Were you positively, listen to this part, reinforced for using your voice or negatively reinforced? So let me give you some examples. Some examples of negative reinforcement would be getting in trouble for oversharing, being told you were precocious, being told you were outspoken, or asking too many questions, or being told that you're too inquisitive, right? When you're told that, then of course you recognize that in order to feel loved and welcomed, you want to avoid the behavior that's being negatively reinforced. So when you're being negatively told that you're being too precocious, that you're asking too many questions, those kinds of things, or you're being outspoken or whatnot, you learn very quickly that that's not acceptable. As a child, you are always looking for cues and indicators as to how to behave so that you're loved and you're wanted and you're needed. On the other side of it, you also might have been rewarded. So that was a negative association. You might be rewarded or praised for being the good girl, right? Being quiet, the girl who doesn't rock the boat, the nice girl. And in your family, the nice girl maybe was the one who went along with everything and everyone else. So it's just a really good thought. So just take a quick moment to reflect on your childhood experience with using your voice and speaking your truth. And I call that your origin. And it's really, really important. Kathy, you still get told that. Yeah, of course we still get told that. These are things that happen. Now, and it starts as a childhood, what starts as a childhood, oh my goodness, belief, ends up as a pattern. And as an adult, we are unconsciously afraid to use our voice because we don't want to be hurt. And again, it might not be a cognitive thing that we don't recognize it, but we have this subconscious connection. And of course, this isn't about blaming parents or blaming our parental figures. Parents and parental figures are almost always coming from a place where they are doing their best. But keep in mind that they also have their own filter, their own traumas, their own experiences as to why they behaved, and they had the dialogue, and they mirrored and mentored to, things to you that they did. So I'm going to tell you a couple of the ways that that can show up as an adult. So we may not recognize it necessarily, but you might end up being the people pleaser. Okay, that's how it can show up in adulthood, or even in childhood for that matter. Not being able to say no. No might be your truth, but yes is easier to say, and it removes that level of guilt or fear of the belief that you're letting someone down, right? So it may be difficult for you to say that. It's easier for you to say yes. It's easier to let yourself down than it is someone else. Number two, you could also be the person who devalues your own opinions, especially if your ideas weren't valued in childhood. Or maybe you were that one that was really positively reinforced or told what a great girl you were when you didn't speak up and say what you thought, when you went along with things, when you were the easy kid, okay? I will tell you, when I was growing up, I don't recall my family necessarily, because it's not always coming from parents or parental figures. It can come from siblings and so on. I've noticed that that's something that came up a lot when I am doing the program. For me, let me tell you, when I was growing up, my dad was fairly controlling in our family. And I can remember on a couple of occasions, probably more than a couple of occasions, my mom would be speaking about something in front of people, and sometimes my dad would just turn to her and say, for God's sakes, Mom, let's just say, no one cares about that. Or sometimes he'd say, no one gives a shit about that. And my mom would have this expression on her face, and she would button herself up and she would move on. And to be clear, my dad never once said that to me. He never said, no one gives a shit or no one cares about that. But let me just tell you something. Do you think that I asked myself every time I wanted to say something that was a little outside the norm, is that going to be okay for me to say? I did. And these are the way these things start. I mean, I can remember even growing up, I almost started to go the other way, where I actually became a bit outspoken, like in kind of, outspoken is an interesting word. We kind of break that down and reclaim your voice. But let's just say the idea of kind of vomiting your information in kind of a different way, right? Looking for attention in the way that you bring that stuff up. And I did that. A lot of times I was told, I'm too much, right? So in my family, my sister and brother were quite quiet. And so then I became the kid as I got older that was too much. And that would be the thing that I would ask myself. Am I too much? Is it too much? And so on. So devaluing your opinions, that's the way it can show up in adulthood. And it can also be that you are a people pleaser. Also, it can show up that you feel unsafe to share. So because sharing might have meant that you weren't any of the things that you feel you needed to be in childhood to receive love from those around you. Very early in childhood, we determine what we need to be, who we need to be in order to receive love from our parents. And quite often, or our parental figures, quite often they don't actually say it to you. In fact, it's not. It's an unspoken and spoken expectation. And so it can feel very unsafe to share because maybe sharing wasn't allowed when you were a child. It can also show up that you might have a strong inner critic. And this is really more of a protective mechanism that we often create in childhood. And this kind of keeps us from stepping out of the comfort zone. So if you judge yourself harshly, then what happens? You'll stay in the safe zone and you'll avoid any of the behaviors that might cause you to be unworthy or unlovable. You also may have a fear of conflict because you have an association between speaking up and tension. And so you will avoid it at all costs. You could be excessively apologetic. So this is when you kind of second guess your speaking up. So it's too much, you're too much. That's where that shows up. I'm past it now, but that's the thing that used to show up for me. It's too much is common in my mind. So you silence your voice. And above all, what ends up happening is your self-worth takes a beating. It's diminished when your inner critic and your self-judgment is high. So these are all the different ways that it can show up as an adult. I'm sure there are other ways. So the bigger question, because I want to leave you with some strategies, is, just recognizing where this is all coming from, or where some of this is coming from, and how do we get past this? And how do we find that place within us that allows us to acknowledge our truth and speak it with more ease? Because this comes up with ourselves, this comes up in business, this comes up in relationships, this comes up in parenting, this comes up in every experience that you have in life. Anytime you need to advocate for yourself or reveal ourselves to the world, reclaiming our voice becomes such a big thing. Like, for example, when we want to be successful, but we don't want to stand out because we have a negative relation to that, for fear of being rejected or shamed or humiliated, or maybe even that feeling of abandonment or unloved. We want to have an intimate relationship, but we don't want to behave in a way that puts us in the fear zone. It just shows up over and over and over again. So I'm going to share with you a few of the things that you can do. Number one, this is what we're doing. Become aware of your past connection to speaking your truth. So this is the part where, little honesty here. The first time I ran this program, Reclaim Your Voice, I ran it as a 5-day mini series, and I thought it'll be so great. We'll just do an hour class every day. We'll do a downloadable exercise. We'll just join in the private Facebook group. We're going to jump in and we'll jump out after 5 days, and we'll have a workshop every single day. It'll be so great. You'll learn what you learn. It's just a great refresher. What I didn't realize is how much the origin work was going to open people up. So I learned something. But this is the thing, we don't want to shy away from it. This is the part where I feel like more than anything, we want to be excessively curious. You can't fix what you don't own. And when I say fix, I don't mean change who you are. It's not a shame or blame. It's just about owning your tendency. It's just about knowing what you have a tendency to do with a heck of a lot of self-compassion, which leads to more self-awareness. And so once you know your blind spots, then when you start to create some empowering strategies, you're just aware. You're just looking out for it, and you're able to recognize it, go, oh, there's my thing again. Then you can use the empowering strategy and you can show up in a more authentic way. So that's the first thing. Number two is know exactly what you're fearful of. So when we started and I said, why is it that sometimes we don't feel like we can say our truth, or we feel like we edit or shrink or silence or backpedal or those things? And it is typically some level of fear, vulnerability, they're all kind of layers of that. So what I would say is know exactly what you are fearful of. If you have certain situations where you find it difficult to use your voice and speak your truth, take out a piece of paper and write exactly all the things in grand detail that you're afraid of that would happen if you were to do that. Okay? So what does speaking your truth mean to you? Like I ask that all the time. What does it mean? A lot of times for people in my programs, it means to them that they are exposing themselves, or it means that they are putting themselves in a vulnerable or risky position. So you need to know what it puts you at risk of, because everybody's going to have a slightly different answer. And I know it's not comfortable to do that, But once you list all your fears, then we can work with the fears. That's number one. And one of the things that you can do is you can decide where it falls in the sphere of control. And what I mean by that is some of the things that we worry about, some of the things that we excessively get concerned about or, try and control are things that you can't control. So go through your list of fears and decide, what do you have total control over? So when you have something that you have total control over, and be very clear with yourself what you have total control over, you know that you are the boss of these things. So you can continue to control what you can control. Very empowering. For example, you have total control of how you choose to respond to someone's disapproval of your truth. Right? So we fear that someone's going to disapprove of our truth or what we have to say, but you know, or you can know with great clarity, that you have total control over how you choose to respond to it. And you have total control over what you share, right? Who you share it with. You decide who has a seat at your table, and you decide who is privy to the things that you want to share in the world. You decide who comes along with you for the ride. So these are things that a lot of times when I'm working with clients, we put way too many things. We put the wrong things in the I have total control box, which we don't have control over. And we put way too many things that we have control over in the I don't have control box. And the truth is that we have way more control than we realize. And the point is to be excessively clear with yourself of what you have control of. So you decide who hears your truths. You decide who you share it to, how you share it, and you decide how you're going to respond if someone has a disapproval of that. And then there are things you have no control over. For example, if you fear disapproval of your feelings by other people, you may fear that. But in reality, you have absolutely no control. Now just listen to me on how someone thinks. You really have no control. And when you know that and you really understand it, but sometimes we'll say, but you don't. You have absolutely no control about how someone thinks. You can say what you want to say. You have control over that. You have control over how you respond to what someone says. You have control over whether you're going to continue to engage in that conversation. You have control over who you're going to share it with and how you're going to share it. But you have absolutely no control over how someone responds and how someone thinks. These are the things that don't deserve a lot of your energy, but they often take a lot of our energy. So our tendency is to make contingency plans for things that are unlikely to happen. And it's good to know that, because a lot of things that we fear, if you really look at it, you're like, not a really great chance of that happening. But how much energy do we put towards it? How much do we allow that to control whether or not we're going to go forward or we're going to stay right where we are? So you can learn how to manage this fear, right? The fear that you have around this with more ease once you realize this, and then you can use resources that are at your control. And then there's things that you have some control over. So when you have all of your fears sitting there, you look at them and determine if there's anything you can do to bring that into total control, or to break it apart and see what aspect of that do you have total control of, and then get clear on what you can't control, okay? So the truth is, and this is really important to really recognize when you're really coaching yourself, is that courageous people worry less about the things that are out of their control or the things that are unlikely to happen. They concentrate on what they can control, and they create empowering actions and mindsets to help them move forward. That's it. That's the most important part. But you have to take the time to break it down, decipher, ask yourself the question. Asking yourself the question is like a portal. If you don't ask the question, your truth has a very difficult time emerging. And here's the other truth around it. Fear is never going to go away. Every single time I press record, or I stand in front of somebody, or I sit across from my intimate partner and I want to say something intimate, let's just say, there's always some element of fear. There is. It becomes the kind of thing where you start to recognize what you control, what you can't, how much energy you're going to put to something and how much not. And instead of thinking about pushing back control, you kind of pull, fear, you pull fear in towards you, and you just recognize that you're going to march along with it. And there's this huge element of being curious about our fear, asking yourself questions, right? And funneling it in the right direction. That's the part that's empowering. Okay? Number 3. If this is fairly new to you, if you found yourself shrinking, editing, silencing, backpedaling a lot over time, and you feel like I have such a difficult time speaking and birthing my truth into the world, practice being truthful in safe places and determine who needs to hear your truth right now. Who needs to hear your truth right now? What keeps you up at night? What makes you feel incredibly uncomfortable? Pick 1 or 2 people that you see relatively often that are fairly safe for you, that you are going to practice showing up in more and more authentic ways, speaking your truth. And I'll be honest with you, when you're really learning to practice this at the beginning, and if this is a skill that you're learning to develop more, you may not choose the people that are closest to you. Okay? That's an important part. And if you're wondering about that, you can reach out to me. We can have that discussion. Because sometimes there is the elephant in the room, the thing that we need to talk about. And if you're the type of personality that has had some practice of this, or you're just like that person that goes for it, that's fine. That could be the person, that can be the conversation, that can be where you practice. But for other people, it feels good just practicing in small places. It's as simple as when someone asks you how you are, or what you need, or what you're doing, or when you say yes to something. Those are all perfect places for you to practice actually telling your truth. Okay, which leads me to, I'm going to tell you the number 1 thing that I will say above all, which is commit to telling yourself the truth. It doesn't even matter if you don't tell anybody else the truth. Reclaiming your voice, stepping into your own feminine arising is all about you speaking your truth to yourself. If you edit, shrink, silence to everyone else in your life, for God's sakes, don't do it to yourself. Gift yourself the honor of telling yourself the truth. You would be amazed at how much we lie to ourselves, how much we bullshit ourselves, how much we edit ourselves, how much we step on our dreams. We're not honest with ourselves. We're not frank. And I don't know where that all comes from, other than some of the things we just talked about. But I definitely feel like it has something to do with this stress and this onus that we place on ourselves to believe that if we say our truth, we 1000% have to act upon it. That's a rule you gave yourself. You can take that right off of the whole thing. And you can just tell yourself that you're committing to telling yourself the truth. You're not necessarily committing to having to follow through with whatever your truth is. Let that work out the way it needs to work out. Okay? Another empowering strategy around all this, I want to go back and talk about that one. Mind blown. I love it, Kristen. Know exactly why you are choosing up more fully in your voice. Exactly why. Exactly why. Know why you're doing it. Because let me tell you, motivation, like this empowerment that we're having a discussion, we're talking about it, we get excited, and then we get in the moment, it's uncomfortable, and we're like, oh, I don't want to do this anymore. I can just do the dishes, or I can just continue doing whatever it is that I'm doing. I can continue shrinking or hiding myself. Knowing your why is like rocket fuel. Okay? I often share my truth. This is something I've learned about myself because, God damn it, it is bubbling up within me. Honestly, it is often less about the person I'm speaking to. Now, of course, this varies in the situation, but it has so much to do with what I feel within me. So know what your why is. Brene Brown talks about this. Being clear is kind. Being unclear is unkind. And so this thing where we will often not say what our truth is because we are in this state of dis-ease because we're not used to doing it, or because it's uncomfortable. But that short-term discomfort is absolutely what paves the way to your long-term ease. right? It becomes much easier in just being who you are. But you have to unlearn this thing that so many of us learned, that we have to wear a mask or show up in some other way. So we have to practice in the small places, okay? Know the cost of becoming the person that attempts to say all the right things to all the right people at the right time. Tell yourself what the cost of it, because it's exhausting. And then what happens to your voice? If you're that person that feels like they have to say the right thing to the right people at the right time all the time, I feel like the cost is that you don't show up as your authentic self. And what you're expressing out to the world is not aligned with what you're feeling on the inside. The cost is, you're right, Carly, it's exhausting. It's so freaking exhausting. Who you are, if you were to draw an X grid, who you are in the core of your being, in every single way, is smack dab in the middle. And we have stories that we've told ourselves about how we have to show up in different parts of our life. This is how I need to show up as a mom, and this is how I need to show up at work, and this is how I need to be a sister, and this is how I need to be a daughter, and this is how I need to be a lover, and this is how I need to be a best friend. And the further away that plot point is from who you are, that's energy. That's energy loss, that's energy expenditure. That's where you're leaking energy. That's the mask that you're wearing. That's what separates from your truth. And then we wonder why we don't necessarily feel intimately connected to our truth. Because A, we either don't tell ourselves the truth, or we get in a bad habit of not telling ourselves the truth when we should be and need to be. Or we're so used to telling ourselves a story about how we need to show up. Okay? Exhausting. Oh my gosh, your comments are amazing. Let me keep going. I'm trying to respect your time. Let it be a process. So even when I do Reclaim Your Voice as a 21-day program, and we take those 6 live workshops and we put them in there, they're about 45 minutes each. And we have these days in between where we're working on it. The truth is, it's a process. So little wins lead to bigger wins, which lead to more courage. Tumbles, the places where we mess up, we fall into old patterns, that leads to more resiliency. And it builds a new story around our ability to speak up. I fully believe that the smallest of hinges swing the biggest of doors. So this is not the kind of topic where we have to go blazing out into the world, deciding that we're going to tell everybody the stark truth about everything. Well, you can do that. That'd be cool. Can I watch that? That isn't really what it's about. It is about coming more into who we are and understanding and telling ourselves the truth and being willing to birth it out into the world is why you're here. Okay? So here's the bottom line. Our truth will always bubble up. It already is. And our job going forward is to ask the questions. You have to ask yourself the question. If you never ask, if you're so busy numbing yourself and busying yourself, your truth won't reveal itself. So you have to ask the questions that help to reveal your own truth. Acknowledge it without judgment, no shame, no blame, without judgment as to what's coming up, and then honor the parts of you that need expressing. And I know that was one sentence and that sounded so easy. It's a practice. It's a practice. That's what's nice about linking arms with other women. When you're all practicing together, you start to understand where you're not showing up for yourself. And it gives you courage to show up in small incremental ways. And it is amazing when you show up for yourself in bigger and bigger ways, the world shows up for you in bigger and bigger ways. Okay, so I'm gonna go through a couple of my favorite personal tips and reminders. I'm just enjoying all the comments here. Okay, here we go. Ready? I need a drink of water. Here we go. All right, a few tips and reminders. Use your voice to unload the burden of keeping things buried within. Use your voice to unload the burden of keeping things buried within. Oh my gosh, if that's not a 2020 comment. Inner tension is what happens when we don't speak our truth. Okay? So admitting our true feelings and being able to say things is a feeling of relief. It's like an outlet. And oftentimes too, knowing that your voice is going to do that for you, but also realizing it can heal you, but it'll also heal other people as well. So when you speak your truth, you're honoring yourself. You're self-honoring, right? That's how we heal ourselves. But know that it does exactly the same thing for others. Okay? What you have to say will have a profound effect on someone else. And we don't even know it. It's crazy. And we get caught up in this story of our own truth that it's difficult to see the power of our story and our voice and our journey, right? This is where we start to devalue our opinions. Don't deny others the gift of your voice and your truth. Okay? Big tip. Tip number 3. When you silence yourself, you become smaller. I think we understand that, right? We can feel that. And when you become smaller, there is less of you for the world to see and experience. And when you give yourself permission to use your voice to open up in the ways that you want to, not in the ways I do, not in the ways that this person does, not in the way that maybe you believe society needs you to. But when you give yourself permission to use your voice the way you need to, because you feel called, you come out of hiding. And this gives you this much grander sense of peace that will help you let go and grow. I know that. I see it. I see it in people all the time. Okay? It's also very much a beacon that brings like-minded people into your life. More connections, more collaborations. Let me tell you, you do this in your business, you do this in the work you do in the world, in all sorts of ways. I mean that in every way. You will be like a beacon. Okay? True communication involves your voice and your truth. When we edit, when we shrink, when we minimize our truth, you really fail to communicate what you mean, right? Because you're already starting off with less than what you actually mean. So you're failing to communicate what you really mean, and in return, people are getting the edited version, and that gift of authentic communication is gone. We all want that gift of authenticity, don't we? Over and over and over, it's what we want. I went on a vacation with 4 girlfriends, 3 other girlfriends. We went to Costa Rica. Oh, what a glorious trip a few years ago, especially in light of what's going on. And we spent 10 days, and we are good girlfriends, but these are girlfriends that I've known for a long time. And we do have this sense of authenticity with each other. We speak candidly and clearly, not all the time, but we do our best. It's very much a part of our friendships, okay? So here we are, this is how we go out in the world. We were at a retreat center, and as the days went on, there was about 20 people there. I would say, I'm trying not to over exaggerate, at least 10 people said to one of us or all of us, wow, you guys have the most amazing friendship. How do you find people like this? How do you find girlfriends like this? Well, if you lead with what you want, you receive what you've put out in the world. If you lead with authenticity, that's what you get back. You lead with it, you receive more of it in return. That's the only way I can see it. Okay, so a lot of times people say to me, how do you find girlfriends like that? I say, are you authentic with the people around you? Well, right? It's like, I know, it creates vulnerability, but this is the practice of it. So we start in small places, and we start to understand how it has this positive feedback loop. And this empowers us to show up in bigger and bolder ways, right? So you don't have to put the pressure on yourself to be there wherever there is. You just need to take a little bit more of a step forward. That's what this is talking about. Okay, number 5. There's 7. I'm almost on time. This is fantastic. Amazing, really, for me. So number 5 is only you can decide what the world sees. Okay, so that's a personal decision. which is kind of cool because you have total control over that. You get to decide the version of you that the world sees. And knowing this, that it's your responsibility to show up as yourself, will allow you to choose courage over comfort more often. It's true, right? You can have all the best reasons for why this has held you back in the past, but only you can decide to change this. It's worth it. Number 6, don't abdicate the responsibility of your own life. And it's just what we talked about. It has to come for you. There are so many reasons not to take a chance, to be more you, to be more authentically you. But there are even more reasons to take the chance. And number 7 is, winding right down, use your voice to spread compassion. It's such an important part, but make sure you use it for yourself. When I think about putting together a program for women, I think about courage. Women are so incredibly courageous. We just don't tell ourselves the truth. I think about authenticity. I think about feminine rising. I think about remembering who we are. Nothing to learn. It's all about remembering who we are. But I think about self-compassion. If we can be compassionate to ourselves, especially when we're doing our origin work, and we look back and we realize, we start to recognize that we've been operating off of old software, so to speak. There's no shame, there's no blame in that. It's just recognizing it and being like, look at that. It's that I did the best I could, and now that I know better, I can do better, especially if you have strategies. Okay, so no one, and I mean no one, moves forward from a place of shame. I feel like if there's anything that you can do, is you can wrap yourself in love and compassion. That's when the best you comes forward, right? That's how we get to emerge, not from a place of shame. Okay, I have one more question. You're welcome, my dear. Okay, here's my last question. You can close your eyes if you want. So let me ask you, how would your life, your business, or the work you do in the world, your relationships to yourself and to others, be different if you could speak your truth more often with more ease and more courage and more confidence? How would your life be different? How would your relationships be different? How would your relationship to self feel different? How would you be able to show up in your business, in the work you do in the world, as a parent, as a sister, as a mom? You're right, Kathy. Let me tell you, the easiest way for me to say it is this kind of work is the kind of work that we're called to do. I'm sure men are called to do it too, but we are called to do it, especially right now. And it will build your 5 selves. Self-honoring. It will build your self-esteem. It will build your self-identity. It will build your self-compassion. And it will build your self-awareness. It will build your 5 selves. My goodness, it's 5:26 my time. So let me tell you a little bit about this, about what's going on. So many of you that are on this call, so I'm going to tell you a little bit about Reclaim Your Voice, so that you have the opportunity to decide whether or not you want to be part of the program. It's a program for women. It starts tomorrow, and it's in this format. We do a virtual meeting, 6 virtual meetings over 21 days. All of them are available in replay, and they have an exercise and a series of things that I teach in each class in this format. And then there's a downloadable exercise that really personalizes it. It allows you to take the concept we've talked about and takes time to journal and write and discern and create clarity and so on. Make decisions, tell yourself the truth, honor yourself. As we move through the program, each thing just starts to build on the next. And then we meet on a Facebook group, a private Facebook group, and that's where we collaborate on the daily. I'm in there multiple times a day. And the program is $147. So if you are interested in the program, and I hope that you will, because I feel like, although it is my program, I feel like your heart wants to lead the way. This is the kind of work that many of us can tell is timely. And if it's not timely for you, I'm so okay with that. But if you want to do the work, I will be sending you an email. Thank you, Andrea. Sending you an email. It's soulinspiredgurl.com/reclaim your voice. And I will put it down in the comments down below. I will be giving away, let me just get myself organized here.